Connection podcast. I'm joined with my co-host. I'm Luke W. Russell, and I've got Julia Metz and PJ with us. I was about to say good morning, but good afternoon, both of you.
Hey, Luke.
Hello.
I think Julia's a little worried about where this show is going to be going today with that start. So today we're talking about human connection, which is what we talk about every time. But in an increasingly digital world where we're constantly connected through our technology, and there's still a staggering number of us that are grappling with feelings of isolation, disconnection. And so what does it mean to establish meaningful human connections that go just beyond the superficial interactions, which is kind of why we call this From Small Talk to Soul Talk. And this is about how to nurture deeper connections to create more satisfying, authentic relationships in our life. So today, that's where we're diving in, and we'll kind of talk about our experiences and some practical strategies. And so with that, before I was kind of always wondering, like, how do we want to jump into today? And as I was in the shower before this, I heard something from Brene Brown that I was like, oh, I got to sit with this, and I want to start with this. So now I got to figure out I changed my Windows, and now I got to find where it is. Okay, here we go. So I'm talking about the word hate. I want to mention the word hate before we, within this context of human connection. And this is a quote from Brene Brown in Atlas of the Heart. What's really fascinating is that hate is actually fueled by our need for connection. Let me read that again. What's really fascinating is that hate is actually fueled by our need for connection. And because what happens is, so Brene Brown goes on to say, when we hate the same people, it creates a counterfeit bond and a sense of belonging. And Brene calls it, put quotes around counterfeit, because she's like, it's not really real. It's just hinging on people agreeing with us and not challenging our ideas. So with that said, who wants to share the next thought?
Wow. When you first read that quote, I love Brene Brown, but when you first read that quote, I didn't get it. But as I think about it, as I hear your explanation as you go deeper into it, I think that's 100% true. I think that I think there's something in us that needs to be connected. I think it's tribal, maybe even, and it's interesting to start off a conversation about small talk to soul talk, talking about hate, but I think it's dead on. I've never really processed it like that, but wow, Luke, again, you've caused me to go someplace I didn't think I was going to go.
2 for 2, Luke. 2 for 2.
So I can't shoot a basketball, so this is the one thing I can do.
All right, so I'm gonna dive in that. It makes perfect sense to me, because I think our longing for connection comes back to a deep need to be seen, right? And this is when we have people who hate and who are driven by fear. It for me, in my observations in life, it comes back to people who feel unseen, right? So if you look at our political climate, people on the far left and the far right feel unseen by all the other folks in the different camps, right? So they are fighting and hating to be seen, right? And that misunderstanding, that belief that if you would only see it my way, then you would see me, then I would feel okay, then we could be friends, then we could all get along, then it would all be okay. Right. So it makes really good sense to me that that's where hate is derived from, because it makes really good sense to me in times of these political upheavals like we have, that we drive the most hurt among us sometimes into toxic cultures, like evangelical cultures, that if you check these boxes and you hate these other people and you do these other things, we'll accept you in and we will see you for who you are, right? Like you will have a home with us. So yeah, and it goes back to the fundamental issue that I don't think we can truly connect with one another in its purest sense until we have connected with ourselves in our purest sense. right? And we have begun to heal the hurt that we've been through.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting thinking about needing or wanting people to agree with me, and how there's this like perceived sense of like, then I'm a little more okay if you agree with me, and if you don't agree with me, then I'm
Mhm.
not okay. As if it's like, and
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes maybe how much that's a reflection of like if other people who don't view the same way are a threat to my okayness, and because otherwise my views are invalid, my views don't matter, and so then it means like I'm like you're, it's almost like our brains think when someone else disagrees, because I'm amazed sometimes how people disagree with me and I'll have this like physiological response, and I'm like, whoa, like this is my best friend telling me why she thinks the Oxford comma is ridiculous. And yes, I will go to my grave on that one. Why it's not ridiculous. But anyways, like, it's funny how like we'll have these conversations with somebody I dearly love, and they'll say something and I'm like, and it's like there's like walls. I'm like, well, I need you to agree with me, or
Yeah.
else I can't connect with you. And part of why I wanted to start with hate in this conversation is because I think when we want to have human connection and we want to have soul talk, or whatever anybody wants to call it, there's barriers to that connection with other people, and I think the need for other people to agree with us is an incredible barrier to connection.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the reason why, Luke. Though, if you the need for someone to agree with us comes back to that need for validation. When we are secure with who we are, right? Like, I am happy to be persuaded or not persuaded, but you don't have to agree with me, and I'm going to be okay. Like, we can connect on different levels at that point, right? Like, I mean, I have lots of conversations with folks who have very different political beliefs than I do, and I have lots of people in my community who ask me why I keep having these conversations. And I said, because at the end of the day, like, my primary goal is to reduce suffering, and they're suffering. Like, they hate me because they're suffering somewhere else over some other thing. But because
Yeah.
I'm secure in who I am and I've done the work to be there, I can have those conversations with them that don't hurt me.
Mm.
Right. Like, so I wonder how much of this is our own work to do to get to the
Yeah.
places that we want to be.
So, Julie, do you think that those conversations can, and making those connections, can reduce or fight hate?
Yeah.
It's hard to like there's a lot of research that suggests like it's hard to hate people that when we know them better. It's easier to vilify an identity and not the individual at times, when like this part of hate. I know that's I guess what's maybe more venturing into the dehumanization category,
Yeah.
which isn't really, that's separate from hate. But I think like there's, when we know people, like when I listen to people talk about things and compare trans people to imps, it's like, man, like we're creating this distance between us, rather than just saying, like, again, you could still be wanting to pass certain legislation, but talk in ways that open up connection. Like, and I'm probably, there's a lot of people who would hate me for what I just said there, is I don't think that people pursuing a certain ideological or legislative path means they inherently hate people. But what it seems to me is that people are behaving out of hate, not, oh, I know people in this community that I want to legislate around it. It seems to me that it's much more from a distance, which is the opposite of human connection.
Yeah. And that by, PJ, engaging in those conversations, this is what I tell people, is that, number one, you have to do what's best for you. Right.
Yeah.
And I put up barriers and boundaries around those conversations that I have with people. Number one, I have them when I'm in the headspace to have them. Right. I'm not saying you don't get to come at me when it's been a long day and I've had phone call after phone call and shit has hit the fan, because, like, no, we are not going to be receiving connection at that time. You are going to be receiving like these words. But if we do it at the right time, I can see them as they see themselves, as their best selves, because at their best self, they want to be a good, loving human being, right? Like, that's what they keep saying. Like, I love you. I'm not judging you, but X. Cool. So I'm believing them when they say, I love you and I'm not judging you, right? I am trusting that is truly who they are at their core. The conversation that I'm having with them is like, so help me understand these other things, and let's kind of walk through that together. in a brave space, right? In a space where we can both admit that there are things that we don't understand, that there are things that we both can do better. I think, Persuaders is a fantastic book on this point. But to the conversation itself, I learned two things, right? So one, I either learned that that's a human being who really, they're open to understanding at least my humanity or my perspective or someone else's humanity and perspective. They're open to growth, or they're completely closed off to growth. And that's a good thing for me to know too, because I don't need to expend my energy on them anymore, right? Like I can move to building connection with people who are actually interested in learning new things, because I also want to be challenged and to learn new things that I haven't thought of in ways that maybe I'm closed-minded about.
Yeah. I want to move us on to talk. I'd like to define human connection. I'm really curious to see how the three of us might describe this concept. I'll go first. It was funny is the fact that, I'm the one who put this all together, and human connection is my passion. And I don't know that I have the greatest definition. For me, human connection is this experience of this. It coincides with thoughts of like, this person, I feel seen or I feel cared for. It's this moment of like, this person's with me. And also, when I say with me, doesn't mean they view everything the same way or that they're necessarily even physically with me, but that we're like this. There's this beautiful joy for me. It's very much a deep, meaningful joy of like, oh, I'm connecting with this other person. I'm sharing something. They're sharing something, and they don't have to be sharing in the equal way. Like I could share something deep, and then it doesn't mean they reciprocate. And that's connection. It just means like I share something, and then they also like it's a give and take. I think human connection is a two-sided thing, but it's also all in my perception, because I can feel really connected to somebody and they might not feel really connected to me. Because we'll see this like play out in romantic relationships where one person feels like, oh, so connected to the other person, whereas the other person feels like they're drifting apart. So that's the other weird thing for me. The conundrum of defining human connection is complicated, because I have a coach who told me our relationships are merely like what our relationship to another person is merely our thoughts about them. There's no inherent objective reality, because my relationship, because we all the time, people feel connected to movie stars they've never met. They feel like that in their perception, they have a relationship with Beyonce. They've never met her. And Beyonce has no idea who they are. And yet we can feel highly connected. What was that?
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
But so that's for me. I know I saw you, Julia, like definitely like struggling with my coach's comment on the it's our our thoughts about another person, but go for it.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. And I guess like, so it's subjective, right? So for me, human connection is the reward, the validation that comes between human beings who have done the work, right? But I see it as the self-work in order to be able to connect, right? So the work that lets me know that when we connect, that we're not trauma bonded, that when we connect, we're not connected in hate, that when we connect, we're not connected in chasing something, that when we connect as human beings, it's because we see value and worth in each other's presence and gift in life, and we share and validate one another's presence and gift in life. Right? Not for anything that you've done for me or anything that I've done for you, but just the gift that our presence is to one another. And I think that comes best when we're doing the work and we've done the work to understand those connections. So I don't see it as one-sided, but I don't know that I'm right either, right? So maybe this is just my idea of real human connection is a back and forth and ebb and flow, like a conversation about, are we connected today? Are we not? Are we in sync? Are we not? I don't know.
Yeah. Luke, I was just having this conversation with Beyonce the other day. And
what did the queen say, Luke? What did the queen say?
I think that my definition, I think you have to have vulnerability in there. And I think that true human connection you're able to see and appreciate each other's vulnerability. And I think that without that, I'm not sure if you can really have a connection.
Yeah. I think there's a distinction, PJ, between chemistry and connection.
Ooh.
And our brain, like the scans and the science tells us that, right? So when we meet someone new and the endorphins are hitting where they're hitting and the things like that, like we experience like real brain chemistry. But when we talk about human connection, like that's something so much deeper, right? So we can experience chemistry with lots of people that have come in and out of our lives, right? Or we can meet someone who, gets things going either positive or negative, right? There's that chemical reaction, that reaction in our brain that's unconscious and uncontrollable to some extent. And then there's the human connection that comes after the work, right? I think maybe we've all had people that we thought we were connected with only to find out that we weren't, because we responded to chemistry before there was connection.
So I think what's interesting here, and I love how like we have, at least me, I have maybe perhaps a minority view of connection here. For me, I feel I experience what I consider human connection if I see someone on the street and we have that just beautiful little moment where we smile, maybe we nod and we cross paths, and that's it. For me, that's part of a whole ecosystem of human connection. It's not all that there is. But to me, I very broadly view human connection as any moment where I'm having essentially a positive moment experience with another person. And that's why I call it, like, I think it can be one-sided, because it doesn't necessarily mean like that person could just be having a bad day and who knows, and they just made something. But for me, that is human connection. It's just there's also a human connection with my kids that's very different from connecting with the person who's bagging my groceries at the store. And so for me, I take a very broad approach, because from a human connection need, we also need those small connections with people at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, or the neighbors that have no substance, but they also, like, there's research that goes into why those are important. And so for me, that's part of why I leave it so broad. But I also think it's interesting to listen to you both kind of describing connection in substantive ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Luke, I see your point. But yet, to me, Julia said it, that feels kind of like chemistry, other than connection. And not to say, and maybe to your point, it's a spectrum, and this is something this is a topic that, quite frankly, there's not a lot of people talking about. So I think that, as I talk it through out loud, I think that there can be, differences of connection, different levels of connection.
Because I've connected really deeply with both of you one-on-one for years. And to me, it's not the same as the moment when I see someone at a place where we have chemistry and then we end up talking and it's fun and I'm excited about it. Like, to me, that's not less of a connection. It's just a different type, but it's still, for me, it's still human connection for me. But what I love about what I like about this is I think this really represents how, like, there is no common definition of human connection. And I'll read Brene Brown's here, which Brene Brown will probably be the person I quote the most, period. But like, I like it because it's also not in alignment with what I'm saying. It's probably in alignment more with what you two are saying. So she defines it as, quote, I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. And for me, that's not all of my relationships, but yet I still experience human connection. For me, like, that beautiful spark of life that, like, is like, ooh. And even if, like, whether we want to just, like, even if it's chemicals firing in my body, that's all everything I experience is my neurons firing. And so I don't personally leave certain things for like Brené's definition. To me, it's just broadly encompassing of that human experience with, like, basically I probably define human connection as anything positive with another person involved.
I'm not sure that's different than her definition, Luke, because she said, seen, heard, and valued. What you're saying is that you don't need the verbalization from the other person to feel seen, heard, or valued in your interaction with them. So I think maybe we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, maybe. And then there's just different. So for me, the act of like smiling at someone or having a moment or connecting with another human being, like in an airport or somewhere like that, is to me just being human, right? I mean, the science and the studies tell us that talking to strangers, boosts our endorphins, right? And then for me as a trial lawyer and for a person who teaches trial lawyers, like I want to talk to strangers to practice my craft. That doesn't feel like connection to me. It doesn't feel as deep as, and I want to value the people that I have actually connected with and not have these human level interactions, because I think that for the most part, we should all be being human and talking to strangers and helping people feel seen or just acknowledged on an everyday basis. But my deep connections, I want to keep and give a special name like human connections so that they feel honored. I don't want them all lumped together. And then to have to describe them differently, right? And I don't know why I feel that way. I just know that that's like in my brain, I want there to be some type of distinction.
Yeah, so Julia, I have a spreadsheet. Which
I know, because I was about to call you out for that.
Yeah.
Well,
your broad definition explains why you're the one on the screen with this friendship spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Does it include lady at the grocery store who was pushing her cart and smiled at me today?
I mean, I have people I met once and had a brief interaction with in there. And but like what's interesting is I listen to you, Julia, is I have, as part of creating a spreadsheet came down to the question of like, how do you organize people? How do you organize relationships? And I feel like people are like, oh, where am I ranked? It's not a ranking system. It's not like, oh, I like Julia more than PJ today. And then Julia says something that pisses me off. And I'm like, never mind, PJ is over Julia. It's I put them into categories. And what I do is I put them into categories based on how I approach the relationship. And I could talk about my spreadsheet for days because of the lessons and beauty it's brought into my life. But from it, I have these important distinctions within there. So when I have that lovely little interaction with the person at the grocery store, then but it's not in the same category. That's in a totally different category from the people like you two who fulfill a very meaningful relationship role in my life. And so I do have very much like the people of types of relationships separated out, but I still like view basically all of this stuff as connection.
Did you do a poll for this so we could poll the audience on how many people have a friendship spreadsheet? Because I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be just
okay. You know what?
Unless Luke shared it with you.
unless Luke shared it with you and walked you through how to use it.
Okay. So the first person I told about my spreadsheet, she goes, and that was the first time I've been friends with for 26 years. She goes, oh, I'm so jealous. I've been wanting something like that for years. And then I'm sitting at dinner with PJ, and PJ just starts laughing at me. And I start explaining it to him, and he goes, you know what, Luke? Maybe you're actually onto something. He's probably going to deny that now, but
no, I said that because yes, I absolutely laughed for a while, if you remember. But the more I processed it, for me, for what your spreadsheet is how frequently you communicate with people.
That's what the very first. That was round one. I'm on version 4.1 right now. If you're talking about version 1.0.
that in and of itself, Luke.
Yeah, I think
we're gonna end this stream right now. Like this is over. We're done now.
Yeah.
Hey, we got someone in the chat that's
You want to read it out?
Perhaps
An
connection can
XY
be
graph.
best visualized as an XY graph.
So y'all are making fun of me. Like
Yeah.
I'm onto something.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Yes, that is.
But we are, though,
Out of
winding
love.
down on our half-hour mark, so we might need to give folks some practical tips on building connection.
Right. We're at the 20 seconds. So yeah, let's talk about like for you, what is a way that you're like, man, this is, you know what? Let's do this. How do you open yourself up to connection?
Wow.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind again is for me vulnerability. And do you see me? And do I see you? That is the first layer. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
For the opening ourselves up for connection, yeah, it's the vulnerability aspect, right? So for me, I had to think about it because I don't think about it because I have no secrets in life, right? I mean, I talk pretty openly about everything that I've been through and the experiences that I have. So it, like, being able to connect with human beings on a very human level is second nature at this point. But for people just starting out, if you want to be able to have more meaningful relationships with people and to connect, number one, start validating yourself and your experiences, right? Stop denying the fact that you're upset or that you're angry. Acknowledge the emotions and work through them so that you can have, or you can recognize those emotions in other people. You know, sometimes we don't recognize people's frustration or hurt or pain because we spent so much time denying it in ourselves, right? And one of the quickest ways to get through to someone is to actually see what they're exhibiting. You know, so start recognizing where you have stuffed those emotions and those feelings. Number one, acknowledge them and learn how to validate yourself, because you'll learn how to then see other people and validate them. And that's a really, really healthy way to forge connection.
Go ahead.
What you just said triggered, to me, it's all about starting with listening. And because if you're not doing that, if you're not listening, then it's very, very difficult for you to be heard if you haven't first listened.
Yep.
And so that's something that I would encourage everybody to do is listen, you know, on different levels of listen to what people say, listen to what people don't say, listen to how they say it, and then inquire about what you've heard. And I think that if you do that, then you get that give and take back, and you're able to build a strong human connection.
So PJ, that took me to a teaching point for everyone to kind of say what you're saying, but in a takeaway for them is that your mindset before you approach conversations and connection with people, ask yourself first, what can I learn about them and from them? So you want to ask yourself that question, then put yourself in this curious state, right? So for me, like, I know I'm curious because my lip goes up on my right side. I'm typically pretty devious if it goes up on the left, right? But on the right side, I'm pretty curious, right? But I know, like, I'll close my eyes and I'll tell them, like, you know what can I learn about them and from them? And then I play a game because I have to have a game in my head. I can ask 2 questions to 1 statement, right? So in your everyday conversations, if you're a person who talks in statements, like you talk at, get a friend, get somebody you know and say, hey, I need to go 2 questions to 1 statement, right? So if you'll hold me accountable for that and teach me what curiosity sounds like coming from me. And then you check in with your body. What does it feel like when you're asking those questions, right? What does it feel like when you've got 2 and then you go to 1? And then it will become second nature to you because you've practiced not only what it feels like and sounds like, but then like internally where it is in your body as well.
Love that.
Love that. For helping this, I feel like there's a million things that people that I could say right now for like opening up. But what I think my most shortest thing I would say here is ask questions. And if it feels weird at first, ask questions. One, I've got a whole video series already filmed and it's in production and it's about asking questions. I believe it is the single most useful tool for just forging connection with people, but there's a lot of explanation behind that. But so there's that. I want to close us out here with the fact that we had a follow-up comment about the XY graph, and I really like that they said, no, they're not making fun. LOL, superficial versus deep on one line, and stranger versus long-term on another line. I'm going to have to sit with that because I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have to because I'm constantly trying to figure out how the spreadsheet can adapt to different complexities and concepts. But
to be clear, Julie and I were making fun.
Yeah, no, we were definitely making fun. But Luke, can I give one more to all the human beings out there who are scared to practice asking questions? Talk to children because they never shame you.
Oh yeah.
Babies will not shame you unless you have taught them to shame. Ask babies questions. Get curious and play with them so that you can get curious with other human beings first.
Yes, I love that. So for anybody listening, make sure if you're on YouTube or if you're not on YouTube, go over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Because like I said, I've got a whole series on asking questions, a whole series on vulnerability, more series already. There's a lot out there. So hit the subscribe button and the notifications so you can get this notifications when we go live on here. And with that, I'm going to close this out since we're at the 31-minute mark. So thank you, both of you, as always.